Unleash the power of your training. Welcome to Improving Your ROI. Here are your hosts, Meridith Bell and Adria Myers.
So Meridith, who's the star of our show today, is our amazing speaker, an accomplished author, as well as a speaker and publisher of assessment and development tools, as well as the president of Performance Support Systems. So we're going to be learning about how to make training stick. So Meridith, the stage is yours.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. I'm so excited to have you here today. One of the big things that we've been involved with for years, 30 years actually, that my two business partners and I have worked together is helping organizations, not just conducting training, because we don't do that. We use our software tools now, but we see so many trainers struggle with not being able to make their training stick. So I have a lot I want to cover with you in our time together. And so if you could put your questions in the chat for Adria to ask me later, or I can get back to you through email or a conversation. So what we're going to talk about is, what is it that's missing in most learning and development programs? Why don't we get the results we hope for? What's required to actually ingrain a skill? A roadmap that leads to high performance after training, a 3-step process for skill mastery, ingredients of a coaching culture, and some questions to help you evaluate your current learning and development programs. So one of the shocking things is that every year, companies around the globe invest something like 250 billions. It's hundreds of billions of dollars in training programs. But the shocking thing is that experts have estimated that in 70 to 90% of the cases, the money that's spent on training is wasted because people don't actually use the information when they get back on the job. And so the question I have for you to think about as we get started is, what's happening in your organization? Do you know what kind of ROI you're getting on the various training and development programs you may have put in place? And over the decades, books like these have been written about this issue of training not sticking. And they all say the same thing. It's a lack of follow-up that isn't happening, the follow-up is not happening. And so the question is, why is this piece missing so often? And I'm going to talk to you about two things that we see as the reasons why, and then give you some specific suggestions on things you can do to make sure your training programs have that sticking power. So the first reason is that sometimes we believe that knowing what to do is the same as doing it, when in fact they are not the same. That just because we introduce information to someone does not mean they're going to actually be able to use it. Whether you have the best speakers, the best curriculum, and whether it's delivered in person or online, that alone is not enough to improve performance, because learning about how to do something the right way is only the first step in the whole process for improving. The true test is, can I do it? Can I use it back on the job? Most of the time, people don't apply what they learn. And so the reason is, when you are in the heat of the moment, you're going to draw on what you know about. So let's say someone went to a class on managing emotions or emotional intelligence, and they learned, oh yeah, managing my internal emotions is very important. But when they get back and they deal with, say, an angry customer, they are in the moment, in the heat of the moment, and they often just react instead of being able to think back to, oh yeah, what was it in that training program I was going to do? That's out the window, because they are working from their old habits, which are deeply ingrained. And so for that reason, they're going to respond with what is most comfortable and familiar to them instead of this new information they got. And the second reason is that creating a new work habit, mastering a new skill, changing a habit, requires that we rewire the brain. And I think sometimes we underestimate how difficult it is to do that. And especially when it comes to skills that we're teaching in a class that people have already developed on their own to some extent or another. I'm not saying how effective they are, but when it's interpersonal skills, for example, they've come here to us already knowing or having a way of listening or resolving conflict. So they're not a blank slate. They have these existing habits and behavior patterns, and that's important to recognize because these habits are hardwired in their brain. And so that means they are strong. There's physical wiring. And so that new pathway that you want them to establish with the new skill has got to be practiced enough for it to become stronger than the old ones. And so I want you to think yourself about some habit you've wanted to change, whether it's an eating habit or the way you play a particular sport you enjoy or musical instrument, it doesn't matter. What you've been doing is like an old familiar road that you've traveled and you could probably drive it with your eyes closed. But at some point you realize, you know what, this way is not working the best for me and I want to learn a new way. Well, that new way is sort of like having now this gravel road that you've got to walk on or travel on. And it is bumpy, it's uncomfortable, and that's a new habit too. You don't have a superhighway overnight. There's a construction period to get from one to the other. And that's the thing we don't often realize when people come to a training class. We just expect them to go back and use it. So here's the reality. When you look at what does it take to improve over time, that first period of time is challenging. And I don't give a certain number of days. It isn't always 21 days because it depends on the complexity of the skill, how strongly ingrained the old one is, and various things. But at some point, the more you practice it, it becomes the way that you do things instead of the old way. So this becomes your superhighway. So this is an important thing to understand for everyone in your organization. So when they go to training or you're doing any kind of instruction, you want to make sure that they are given the opportunity to really practice the skills. And so what I want to focus on is this step 3 here in this, think of it as a roadmap. The first one is where you diagnose what people need to work on, what skills they need to improve. The second step is where you design and conduct the programs that teach those skills. The third one is the piece that's so often missing. And I call it the follow through. And this is where we need to have the reinforcement, the opportunity for practice, and some of those other elements that you see there. And I'm going to go into those in more detail now. And as I do, I want you to be thinking about, do we have these in place in the kinds of training programs that we present or conduct? So the first one is to recognize 3 stages of learning. And are you giving people the opportunity to have all 3? Focus, action, reflection. And focus means focusing on one skill or habit at a time. So all the overachievers or high achievers that you have, or if you are one like me, you tend to want to take on more than one. But really, you'll be more effective if you focus on improving one thing, because that can have a ripple effect on others. So how do you choose that one thing? Well, first of all, people could decide themselves. They know something that's been tripping them up and they want to improve it. Another way is to get guidance from a coach if they're working with someone in a coaching capacity. And the third is simply to ask others. So maybe you've gone through a 360-degree feedback survey or done some other kind of assessment that's identified for you. What is it that are your strengths and where is it that you could improve or develop? And so one of those ways, you zero in on one thing. Then once you've identified it and you know the proper way to do it, you want to look for opportunities to apply it on the job, because practice is the key to building that pathway to make it stronger. And so you've got to keep repeating it over and over again. The third step is reflection. And this is the one that many times we miss because we are so busy, we don't slow down long enough after we've applied it to think about what happened and analyze what lessons can I take from this to use next time. But if you do this, it actually accelerates skill mastery, even though in the moment you may say, I don't have time to do this. It pays off in a big way. So here are 5 questions. And by the way, I'm going to provide a copy of these slides at the end. I'll give you a link so you can download them so you don't have to worry about trying to write down a lot of notes. But these questions are part of the reflection process. And you can ask these of yourself after you've tried to apply a skill. You can also ask it of someone at work. You could also ask this of your kids. These are great for avoiding the tendency to tell, give advice, lecture, correct, all the things that don't work, right? So the first question is, what happened and how did you feel about it? Left brain, sequence of things. Right brain, what emotions were going on with you. And then looking at, why did it happen that way? What were you thinking? What was your motivation? What was behind that? What was going on around you? And then what were the consequences? Did you get the outcome you wanted? Or did something else happen that you wished had not? And finally, how would you handle a similar situation in the future? This is where the real learning takes place, because you're envisioning yourself doing something better. And then finally, what will you do now? I forgot, that was one more step, is so that you can think about, what is an action I could take? Or the next time I apply this, what am I going to do? And that really helps and sets you up for doing it better the next time. So this is really a cycle of focus, action, reflection, where you are repeating over and over until this new habit gets established. Another important element of this whole process of follow through is providing coaching for people. Now, this doesn't mean hiring a coach. Before we look at what are the possibilities here, I want to just point out how some other areas outside the workplace handle coaches and what purpose coaches serve. So with professional athletes, if it's an individual athlete who hires a coach or someone working on a team where they have multiple coaches, what these coaches do is, of course, they teach the basics, they teach the skills, and then they watch the player apply them. They give them feedback on what they did well, how they could improve. So they're analyzing that with the ultimate goal of improving performance. And this kind of process works at work as well. Another application of coaching is in the lifestyle changes that we want to make. For instance, Weight Watchers or any of the 12-step programs, they rely on having sponsors or someone else who serves as an accountability person or process that helps you stay on track when you're trying to adopt new behavior patterns. Because really the purpose of a coach is to support and hold accountable. And so when you think about putting coaches in place for people to have as a support system after training, these are some of the things the persons can do. They can have, serve as giving reminders, holding them accountable, giving them feedback and encouragement. Now, the thing is, many organizations bring in an executive coach for upper levels of management, but what are you going to do for everybody else? Because you can't economically really bring in a coach for every person. So an alternative to that is what we call peer coaches. And this is not our concept, but it's the idea of having someone who cares about a person's success provide the kinds of things you see on the left. And those individuals can be any of the kinds of people listed on the right. Often it can be someone that's gone through a training program with another person. They've learned the same content, so they're going to work in pairs or in cohorts to really help each other as they apply those skills. So I'll give you a quick example. I had attended a conference a couple of years ago, and I don't know if you've attended a conference and had the best of intentions to apply something, and then you get back and your notes get filed, and then you end up not using the information. So it's sort of like going to a training class. And I was determined, because the information was so valuable, I was not going to let that happen in this case. So 2 years ago at this conference, I hooked up with another gal, and she and I made a commitment to talk to each other on a regular basis. And we have every 2 weeks for the past 2 years. I've been in a call with this gal, and we ask each other these questions. So this is just one potential structure that you could put in place for people working with a peer coach, a support coach, whatever term makes sense for you. But it is also their accountability person. So you can share wins that you've had from the last time you talked. Maybe you've applied the skill and had a great success and you want to share that. And you also just review what you previously committed to. Did you complete it? And if you didn't, say, apply the skill the number of times you had committed to, why not? What did you do instead? What prevented you from doing what you said you would do? And then you make new commitments to each other and agree on when you'll talk again. And then you ask for any help or ideas around issues that you're struggling with. So knowing you have this person to talk to on a regular basis really keeps the skill you want to work on front of mind. And you know you're going to have someone you can go over this with who cares about your success. And that's the core requirement really for someone to be an effective peer coach, is to care about the other person and be committed to helping them. Another aspect of coaching comes in the form of feedback, because as you're applying a skill, you need to have some checkpoints where you find out, how am I doing with this? You know, am I hitting the target? Am I still falling short? Where do I stand? So asking people, taking the initiative to ask for feedback of those who work with you and know this is what you're working on, to say, you know, how am I doing? And then when they tell you, you listen without defending or justifying or explaining why you did something a particular way. Instead, if they are pointing out something where you could improve, acknowledge it. And here's a master power play, is to thank them and apologize, because you have a blind spot you didn't know about and they have pointed it out. And that is huge, because not many people are willing to apologize. We think we'll look less. Instead, people will think more of us if we're willing to admit when we've made a mistake. And thanking them helps them appreciate the fact that you acknowledge what they've said, and sets them up to be more likely to give you honest feedback in the future. So that's really important. Then you commit to taking specific actions or stop doing certain things, and then follow through with it by doing those things. And then you cycle back to ask for feedback. So this is a critical part of the follow through process. Do you have feedback built in? And then as we're trying to make changes, people are going to get discouraged. We aren't going to get it right 100% of the time, or sometimes even 50% of the time. And so when you notice someone seems discouraged, you can approach them and say, you don't seem like yourself today. Is something going on? And so the first thing you want to do if they decide to open up to you is simply listen. People, when they are discouraged, don't appreciate advice, direction, minimization. Oh, it's not so bad. You should hear what happened to me last week. You know, they don't want that. Here's what you can do instead. After listening, you can affirm strengths that you know they have, that they may have lost sight of because they're dealing with this, so they're kind of down on themselves. So you can point out past successes to help them realize, okay, I have done some things well. And the other thing you can do is offer perspective, because when people are down on themselves, they can also be down on the situation. And so it's that glass half empty or empty, instead of seeing the possibilities and the opportunities. So you could point out some of the upsides when they are real, not being Pollyanna, but just to help them get back in balance. And then the final thing is simply to ask, what do you need from me right now? How can I best support you? What would support look like to you? Because what you might want for support may be very different than what they want. So don't make assumptions. You can ask and then try to be there for them. Because I can guarantee you, when we're trying to change something in a major way or improve something, we're going to have times when we have setbacks and we can get discouraged. So when those elements are combined, then what you can have is that high performance and a coaching culture where people care about each other, whether it's on a team or in the organization as a whole, but they're committed to each other's success. And so they're willing to help each other, to ask questions, to support them. And so let's just look real quickly at the ingredients of a coaching culture, because I think that comes as a result of doing all this follow through and the kinds of elements I just talked about. For one thing, part of a coaching culture means teaching people the skills that they need to use in order to be a part of such an organization, and then giving them opportunity and time to practice those skills. Setting up coaches and a support system. So you might have one accountability coach, other support coaches, and then you get agreement from everybody on the norms for the behavior of that team, so that everybody knows how we're supposed to act to support each other. And this final one is critical. And it's, of course, the key, a linchpin to everything. And that's leaders need to be willing to model these same behaviors so that they're not sitting on high saying, okay, you guys need to do this, but I'm okay. That doesn't work as well when you don't have the leader buying in and actually following the same things that the whole team is trying to accomplish. So when you look at these ingredients, are any of them missing from your learning and development programs that you would want to add in to make sure that what you're creating is really positive and has a positive ROI as well from the investment you're making? So here are some questions that you can ask. What happens after training in your organization? Do participants get involved in a structured follow-up program, or do you just assume now we've done the training, you're expected to use it with no support from us? Do you systematically measure their performance several months later to see if, in fact, there have been improvements? Because that's an important part to see, are our programs working? And what elements might be missing to achieve the desired results? What might you want to add? And finally, what's the number one step you could take next to improve outcomes from your training programs and create a coaching culture like I've been describing here? And finally, I want to just share some resources that we've created that may be useful for you. We have 2 books that we've written. Connect with Your Team is about the top 10 communication skills. So if interpersonal skills are an area you want to work on or have people work on and make available, this book is a very practical guide with sample dialogues and very specific steps on how to do things right, like giving feedback, receiving feedback, resolving conflict. And we also have a book called Peer Coaching Made Simple. It's a very short guide that provides exact steps for what to do in an accountability session together when you're trying to coach someone else, and also what are the skills you'll want to apply. So you don't have to be a professional certified coach in order to be an effective peer coach. You can help others that way. And we have a free resource for you at growstrongleaders.com, our website /free. It's basically the chapter from the book on listening, which is really the foundation skill of all the skills, called Listen Like a Pro. And if you'd like to have a conversation with me, just email me, meredith@growstrongleaders.com. And also on our website homepage, growstrongleaders.com, we have a video about these 2 books, how they can be used in the organization. And there's a button where you can schedule a call with me if you'd like to have a conversation. We also have other products to support development, and those are available on the website as well.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and what a great way to close our session today. And Meredith, I just want to thank you again for your time and your expertise and your knowledge and pouring into all of us today. So just a huge thank you from Tortal and everybody. And